Today's sew-along is the slim pants from Unfettered Patterns. I made sure to sew a practice pair which turned out great and helped me fine-tune some details. For this pair, I did decide to lengthen them 2.5 inches, and that's something for you to consider as you make your own pair since I'm only 5'0". These pants have a front fly, a waistband, and belt loops. I'm using a wool chambray here and a dorme lining for the pockets, both materials from Rex Fabrics. Join me in sewing nice slacks that will likely become a tried and true pattern in your sewing room. Let's get started. Here are my pocket backing pieces. Finish the side and bottom edges in your preferred method. Place the wrong side of the corresponding pocket backing piece onto the lining piece. Pin along all 4 sides. And repeat for both lining and backing pieces. Along the top and side edges, we'll baste these 2 pieces together. And for those inner finished edges, we're going to edge stitch along our finishing stitches. Now we'll place our lining piece right sides together with the slanted edge of the front pant piece. Pin the slanted edge. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Turn your pocket lining over its seam allowance and give that seam a good press. Sew the pocket lining to the seam allowance underneath with about 1/8 inch seam allowance. Once that's understitched, turn your pocket lining to the inside along the main seam line. Give that a good press. Now that I have my main slanted seam pressed, I'm going to fold my pocket lining in half from notch to notch as marked from the pattern piece. And give that inner edge a good press. I'm going to pin the upper edges together as well as the side edge, just pinning from the bottom of that slanted edge to the notch along this side edge. Then pin the bottoms of the pocket lining together. Sew and finish the bottom edges of the pocket lining only. Now that the bottom edge of the pocket is finished, I'll place one more pin along the side edge of the pant, and we'll baste the pocket lining in place along the top and side edge of the pant. Repeat to create the slant pocket for your opposite front pant piece as well. Then place both front pant pieces right sides together. And we're going to pin them together from the notch transferred from the pattern piece for about a 1-inch distance. Sew this small section together from the notch, backstitching to secure and also backstitching at the end of your stitches. Now that I've sewn that tiny section at 3/8 inch, for my left front pant piece only, I'm going to snip into the seam allowance from the raw edge to my stitching line once again where the notch is from the pattern piece. And I've made that snipping once again for the left front pant piece only. Now for the raw edges of this crotch curve for both sides of the front pant, I'm going to finish the seam allowances. For that left front pant piece that we snipped into, I'll finish from the top to the snip, then sew a fresh set of finishing stitches for the rest of the crotch curve. And for the right side of the pant, you can finish from the top to the bottom of the curve. Press the finished edges of the left front pant piece to the wrong side. Just pressing back for the width of the finished edges. So this should be at most 1/4 inch. Now that I have my finishing stitches pressed to the wrong side, I'm going to flip this over. Now with the right side of the zipper facing me, I'm going to place it underneath that folded edge. You want the bottom zipper stop of your zipper to be at the notch transferred from your pattern piece. With that corresponding edge of the zipper tape tucked underneath, pin in place, allowing those zipper teeth to butt right up against that folded edge. Using your zipper foot, baste the zipper in place right along the edge of that fold. Fold your fly shield in half, right sides together, and pin the bottom edge. Sew the bottom edge with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, then turn this piece right side out. And giving your folded edge a good press. Finish the long raw edges together. Place the fly shield on the wrong side of the zipper. The top raw edges of the fly shield align with the top raw edges of the pant, and the finishing stitches of the fly shield sit on top of the basting stitches that we sewed earlier. And pin in place. Now I'm going to sew the fly shield through all thicknesses, stitching from the front of the garment right on top of my original basting stitches. So we're sewing this fly shield in place from the top of the zipper to the notch transferred from the pattern piece. Apply interfacing to the wrong side of your fly facing piece. Now I'm going to finish the curved edge. Place the right side of the fly facing right sides together with the right front pant aligning the top raw edges. And pin in place. Sew from the top to the notch with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching to secure. We're going to understitch the fly shield in the same way as we understitched the slanted pockets earlier. Turning the fly facing over its seam allowance and giving that seam a good press, then sewing the fly facing to its seam allowance underneath with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the top to the notch, backstitching to secure. Press the fly facing to the inside of the garment along the original seam line. Lay the finished edge of the right front pant over the left. Because of the slight differences in seam allowances for those center edges, the right folded edge of the fabric will overlap slightly over that left folded edge of the fabric. Pin in place through all thicknesses. Baste the left front pant to the right front pant along that folded edge. Turn the garment to the inside and pin the fly shield out of the way. Also fold back the right front pant piece. We're going to sew the remaining side of the zipper tape to the fly shield. Pin in place. I'm going to sew this with 2 series of stitches. First from the top to the bottom of the fly shield close to the zipper teeth, then once more about through the center of that zipper tape. Now with the fly shield still pinned out of the way, I'm going to turn the garment to the right side so that my zipper is flat and the fly facing is underneath the right pant piece. Using my finger to feel through the fabric so I can feel the finishing stitches along the edge of the fly facing, I'm going to draw myself a line with the heat erasable pen. Just drawing a curved line here so that when I sew, I'm catching those finished edges of the fly facing on the inside. I'm going to sew right on top of my curved line from the top to the bottom of the curve, back stitching at that center front seam. Working once again from the inside of the pant, unpin the fly shield. We're going to hand tack the fly shield and the fly facing together right along the bottommost edge. Make sure that you're catching only that bottom finished edge of the fly facing so you don't stitch through the front of the pant. And now we can remove those basting stitches along the center front. Now you can open up your zipper. You should have a beautifully installed fly front. I've gone ahead and finished the side seam and the inseam on both sides of the front pant, as well as finishing the crotch curve, the side seam, and the inseam for both back pant pieces. Now I'll place the front and back pant pieces right sides together and pin together the inseams on both sides. Sew the inseams from top to bottom on both sides with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you've pressed those inseams open, place the back pieces right sides together, as well as the front pieces right sides together. Pin the crotch curve from where our stitches ended along the bottom of the front pant pieces all the way across that back curve to the top of the back pant. Sew from the end of the front stitches across the seam to the top of the back pant with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seam open. Place the front and back pant pieces right sides together along each side seam and pin in place from the top to the bottom. Sew the side seam from top to bottom with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, press the seam open, and repeat for the opposite side seam. On the wrong sides of the back pant, I've transferred my darts. For each set of darts, I'm going to fold the material right sides together and pin. Then I'll sew each of the darts from the top of the pant to the point, leaving thread tails at the point so I can tie them in knots. Once I've sewn both darts, I'll press them both toward the center back. Fold your belt loop piece lengthwise in half, wrong sides together, and give that a press. Open that fold back out, then press both long edges to meet the center crease. Once your edges are folded to the inside, fold in half once more along the initial crease, and then edge stitch along both long edges from top to bottom. Repeat for both belt loop pieces. Then we'll cut 6 belt loop pieces to be 3.5 inches long each. Align the short edges for each belt loop along the top of the pant at the markings and pin in place. Baste each belt loop in place. With your zipper opened, trim any excess zipper tape along the top of the pant. Place the uninterfaced waistband piece right sides together with the top of the pant so that the short end extends 3/8 of an inch beyond the finished edge and pin in place. Do the same for the finished edge on the opposite side. Continue pinning the waistband in place along the top of the pant, aligning your notches. Sew the waistband to the top of the pant all the way around from center front to center front with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Turn the waistband up and over the seam allowance. Give it a press all the way around so that the seam allowance is pressed up toward the waistband. For my other waistband piece, I've interfaced the wrong side and pressed the bottom raw edge to the wrong side by 3/8 of an inch all the way across. Place the top raw edges of both waistband pieces right sides together and pin along the top edge. After you've pinned the top edges all the way around, also pin the short edges, maintaining the pressed up seam allowances for both sides. Starting from those folded edges on one side, sew upward with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, pivot to sew along the top edges all the way around, pivoting once more to sew down the short edge on the opposite side, sewing over those folded edges. Trim the topmost corners, turn the waistband right side out, and give it a good press. Once you've pressed your waistband to the inside, the folded edge that we pressed earlier should just cover the waistband stitching line. Pin in place from the outside, placing your pin inside the main seam so that it catches that folded edge on the inside. Stitching in the ditch from the outside, sew from one center front all the way around to the opposite center front, keeping your eye on that inner fold to make sure you are catching that edge. To finish each of the belt loops, fold the top raw edge to the wrong side by 3/8 of an inch and align that fold with the top of the waistband. And pin in place. Repeat for each belt loop. Top stitch the top edges of each belt loop in place. Mark the buttonhole placement from the pattern piece onto the right waistband and sew in place. Mark your button placement from the pattern piece onto the opposite side of the waistband and sew in place. For the bottom hem of the pant, I'm going to fold that bottom raw edge to the wrong side by 1/4 of an inch. Then fold the bottom raw edge to the wrong side once more by an additional 3/4 of an inch. Edge stitch along the upper inner fold all the way around, repeating for the bottoms of both legs. And now the pants are complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future sewing tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video.